I still remember the day I first arrived in Summerwind City. The sky was clear, the midday heat oppressive, and my nerves fluttered in my stomach like dozens of moths. I was 19, determined to attend the local university, and had arranged to share a small upstairs room with my childhood friend, May. Everything felt new and bright with possibility, until the night we realized one of our belongings wasn't quite what it seemed. When I climbed the narrow staircase for the first time, carrying an overstuffed backpack, I found May in the tiny living area, her short hair pinned up to fight the heat. She'd arrived an hour before me, already sweeping dust from corners and cheerfully declaring that the place had good bones. Despite the peeling paint, faint musty smell, and battered secondhand furniture, I admired her optimism. The landlady, Ms. Nguyen, gave us a curt nod when we knocked on her door to pay the first month's rent. "No partying, no trouble," she said. "Walls are thin. Keep it quiet, or you'll disturb the neighbors." That was fine with us. We were both serious about our studies, and partying wasn't high on our list of priorities. Over the next few hours, we unpacked. I mostly had brand new supplies or items gifted by relatives: pillowcases, a small cooking pot, a simple table lamp. May, on the other hand, came with a mishmash of older objects her older sister had passed down, plus a few freebies from her aunts. One of these items was a pair of small round mirrors, one pink, one green, each slightly bigger than a saucer. They had little plastic stands attached at the back so they could sit upright on a desk or tabletop. We placed them on a shelf for the time being, not giving them more than a cursory glance. Neither of us felt the need to use them yet, because the room happened to have a built-in vanity mirror from the previous tenants, an old dusty fixture nailed to the wall. "Guess we won't need these little ones, right, Rena?" May said with a grin, plucking at the pink mirror to wipe its surface. "This built-in mirror is bigger anyway." I shrugged, stuffing some socks into a dresser drawer. "Sure. We'll keep them around, though. Never know when they might come in handy." We had no idea how fateful that decision would be. For the first 6 months, everything was perfectly normal. We used the large vanity mirror most of the time, rarely touching the handheld ones. We attended our classes, studied late into the night, occasionally heated canned soup on a rickety hot plate, and gossiped quietly about professors. If either of us had a strange dream or a fleeting sense of dread, it went unnoticed. Then, our landlady informed us she was raising the rent on the upstairs unit. She offered us a cheaper room on the ground floor, a bit smaller, no built-in mirror, but nearly 20% less per month. We agreed to move, as finances were tight. Besides, how different could it be? We discovered it was, in fact, quite different. The new room had chipped tile floors, a single small window facing a dim alley, and most notably, no wall mirror. So now the 2 small round mirrors May had brought were necessary for day-to-day grooming. We used them for applying makeup, checking our hair, or plucking stray eyebrows. May placed the pink mirror on the corner of our new desk, while the green one ended up on a shelf above our mini fridge. "I prefer the pink one," May said, giving the green mirror a dismissive wave. "I like the color better. Use whichever you want, Rena." I didn't have strong feelings about color, so I occasionally used the green mirror. Over time, I noticed it seemed older, its plastic stand was slightly scratched, and the reflective surface felt less clear than the pink one. But it was still functional. Late one night, about a month after we moved into the ground floor room, I experienced something I can only describe as a waking nightmare. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I woke with an urgent need to use the bathroom. After tiptoeing down the hallway and back, I settled onto my floor mattress, half asleep. My eyes fluttered closed, but my body felt strangely tense. Suddenly, my limbs froze. It was as though every muscle locked up. My arms lay stiff at my sides, while my hands seemed clenched into fists so tightly that nails bit my palms. My entire being felt forcibly lifted, just an inch or two, but enough to sense I wasn't quite resting on my mattress. Panicked, I tried to move or speak, but couldn't. A rasping voice reverberated in my mind. "Rena. Rena." My eyes stayed shut, yet I had a vivid mental image of a woman's face, drawn and pale, whispering my name in an almost mocking tone. A wave of dread flooded me as I sensed she was calling me from inside something. The impression flickered. It was like she stood within the reflection of a mirror, pushing against the glass. And for whatever reason, I was certain it was the green mirror. Her voice repeated my name, more insistent this time. I couldn't answer, my throat stuck as though invisible hands choked me. My heart hammered in my ears. The presence felt so real, a voice layered with quiet malice. In a final attempt to break free, I strained every muscle, and the voice turned into a shriek. I woke fully, gasping. My pajamas were damp with sweat. When I glanced down, I saw my fingers still curled, half digging into my palms. The slight sting of broken skin told me I'd scratched myself. Shivering, I flipped my phone's flashlight on to check the room. That was when I saw the green mirror sitting only a foot from my mattress, propped at an odd angle on the floor. Why was it there? My mind reeled. I didn't recall placing it anywhere near my sleeping area. Usually, it stayed on the shelf or occasionally on the desk. Could May have moved it? She was fast asleep on her own mattress, on the opposite side of the room. I barely slept after that, half convinced I was overreacting to a nightmare. But deep down, it felt more than just a dream. Something about that woman's presence lingered in my mind, and the fact that the green mirror lay so close unsettled me. The next morning, May found me in the kitchen area, leaning against the sink. She immediately noticed my haggard look. "Everything okay, Rena? You look beat." I hesitated. Telling her I'd had a ghostly encounter sounded ridiculous. Just a bad dream, I guess. Didn't sleep well. "Nightmares happen," she said sympathetically. "You want to skip the morning lecture and rest?" I shook my head. "Nah, I'll push through. I'll be fine." The green mirror was back on the shelf when we returned that afternoon, as if it had never moved. I almost brought up the weirdness with May, but decided to let it go. She'd probably shrug it off, or maybe even laugh. After all, one freaky dream didn't prove anything. However, that night, I lay awake, eyes darting around the dim room, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. Days turned into a week, and I convinced myself I'd simply had a bout of sleep paralysis, made worse by overthinking. I continued using the green mirror from time to time, albeit with a minor shiver whenever I looked directly into it. No more strange occurrences happened, for now. 3 weeks later, May came home late, complaining that she'd accidentally stepped on a small round mirror belonging to a new friend, Lee, during a group study session in a different dorm. She'd borrowed the mirror, left it on the floor, and ended up breaking it. Lee was upset, so May promised to replace it. She rummaged through our shelf, picking up both the pink and green mirrors. "I guess I'll give Lee my pink mirror," May muttered, biting her lip. But actually, wait, someone else might prefer pink, and Lee's was originally white. Let's just give her the green one. Or does that color look too old? I froze. "You're giving away the green one?" "Yeah, why not? I still have the pink." She sighed. "Plus, I like pink more. The green is just not as cute." Something inside me clenched. The memory of that strange night leapt into my mind. Should I warn May that something was off about that mirror? I swallowed, my rational side telling me that was silly. "Sure," I finally mumbled. "If you want." May tossed the green mirror into a small plastic bag, intending to hand it to Lee the next day. That was that. I felt an odd swirl of relief and guilt. If the mirror truly had some weird presence, were we pawning it off on an unsuspecting friend? But I reasoned that it was just one strange dream. I'd be paranoid to assume the mirror was haunted, right? Life quieted for the next month. May parted ways with the green mirror, and we continued our day-to-day business. Then a friend of ours named Jin, a petite girl from the same social circle, reached out, telling me something bizarre. She privately confided that she'd had a sleepover at Lee's new apartment and saw something disturbing involving the mirror Lee had recently acquired. One afternoon, Jin and I met at a cafe near campus. She stirred her iced coffee anxiously before speaking in a hush. "Rena, you know how Lee's been living with her cousin, right? I stayed over at their place last weekend, 'cause I was locked out of my dorm. Well, yes, aviso meeting." I tensed, suspecting the worst. "What do you mean?" Jin inhaled. "I was rummaging for a hairbrush, and I found a green round mirror lying on a table. I figured it belonged to Lee. Anyway, that night, I woke up around 2 a.m. from a weird rustling sound. I turned over and saw, in the moonlight, a shape in the mirror. A woman's face, pale, with these hollow eyes. I freaked out and flipped the mirror face down. A cold sweat prickled across my back. "A pale woman," he echoed. "Yeah, and it felt like she was about to say something. I've always been a bit sensitive to these things, but I've never seen an actual face before. It was horrifying. I told Lee in the morning, but she just laughed it off, said I was imagining stuff. I swallowed. Jin, that mirror, was it the same shape and size as ours? May gave Lee a green mirror about a month ago. Jin blinked. Really? Then it must be the same one. Lee said she got it from a friend who was replacing her broken one. We stared at each other in tense silence. My mind reeled. The same ghostly woman I'd perceived. She was indeed in that green mirror, not just my imagination. I wanted to confess my own experience to Jin, but my words died in my throat. I mumbled a vague acknowledgement and parted ways, thoughts swirling. That evening, I marched home and confronted May. May, about that green mirror you gave Lee. Did you ever have weird experiences with it? She glanced up from her laptop. No. Why? I hesitated, then spilled the entire story. My partial paralysis, the sense of a woman calling my name, the memory of seeing the mirror oddly close by. As I spoke, May's eyes widened. Then I relayed what Jin had said about seeing a pale woman's face in the same mirror. That's chilling, she admitted, voice trembling. I guess I should have suspected something when you mentioned that weird dream. And now Lee's friend saw it too. I nodded, feeling my heart pound. I'm worried about Lee. If that mirror is truly haunted, it might cause her trouble. May's face paled. I basically saddled her with it. Gosh. May and I decided to talk to a mutual acquaintance, Ray, who happened to be a young monk in training at a local Buddhist temple. We texted him a simplified version of the story, asking for advice on what to do with a possibly cursed or haunted object. Ray's messages were quick and calm. If you believe an item harbors a restless spirit, best to retrieve it and bring it to the temple. We can perform a cleansing or disposal ritual, depending on the situation. So May and I resolved to ask Lee for the mirror back, explaining we just realized it belonged to May's sister originally, and we needed to return it to the rightful owner. We didn't want to scare Lee or make her think we'd given her a cursed item on purpose. The problem was, Lee had recently moved to another part of town and had become somewhat distant. But eventually, we managed to find a time to visit her. We showed up at her new flat with polite smiles, not mentioning the ghost at all. Lee, May began, forcing a grin. Actually, about that green mirror. Turns out my sister asked for it back. She's sentimental, apparently. Sorry to inconvenience you, but do you mind? Lee seemed taken aback. Huh, that's random. I guess you can have it, though. I hardly use it anyway. We exhaled relief. As Lee rummaged in her bedroom, May shot me a nervous glance. When Lee emerged, she handed the green mirror to May with a shrug. Here you go. Good as new. I shuddered inwardly, suspecting the entity inside was anything but good. We thanked Lee and hurried out. The plan was to bring the mirror straight to the temple that afternoon. We had it wrapped in a towel, not wanting to stare at it. But in the taxi, as May cradled it on her lap, I couldn't resist the urge to peek. Carefully, I lifted the edge of the towel. The mirror's surface caught a glint of sunlight, revealing nothing unusual, just a scuffed plastic edge and the faint reflection of my own anxious face. Still, my chest felt tight. Don't do that, May hissed, quickly covering it. We don't want to see anything right now. I nodded, heart pounding. We arrived at the temple's courtyard, paying the taxi driver, then stepping into the serene environment. Incense perfumed the air, wind chimes tinkled, and orange-robed monks shuffled about. Ray greeted us in the main hall, smiling gently. You have the mirror? He asked softly. May nodded, handing over the towel-wrapped object. Ray studied it with curious detachment, as though it were any random item. Come, he said. We'll go to a small room where we do item blessings. Inside a modest chamber behind the temple's main altar, Ray lit an incense stick and offered a quiet prayer. Then he set the mirror on a low wooden table, the face angled upward. My pulse hammered as he murmured certain lines of a chant, occasionally sprinkling water around it. After a few minutes, he paused, eyes narrowing. I can sense something unsettled, a presence that lingers, possibly attached to the object. It might not be malevolent in the worst sense, but it's restless, clinging, that can cause disturbing visions or illusions for those who use it. May exhaled. So we're not crazy. No, not crazy, Ray said softly, just unlucky. This can happen with second-hand or very old items that pick up negative or lost energies. He resumed chanting. The air felt charged, thick with tension. I clasped my hands together, mind swirling with images of that pale woman calling my name. If that's what she was, just a restless soul. I quietly hoped this ceremony might set her free. At last, Ray finished the ritual. We usually either cleanse the item thoroughly, or, if it's too saturated with negativity, we bury or destroy it in a respectful manner. I sense we can cleanse it, but it may require a full day to be sure. May nodded eagerly. Do it, please. We don't want it back in our house. Ray offered a kind smile. We'll keep it here, sealed away. If you'd like to be done with it, we'll discard it after the cleansing. That might be best. We agreed wholeheartedly, grateful to relinquish the mirror for good. I felt a weight lifted, like an invisible chain had fallen away from my shoulders. In the weeks following, May's older sister confirmed she'd originally found the mirror at a local flea market. She'd used it for a year or two but never noticed anything bizarre. Then again, she rarely used the green one, preferring the pink. Possibly, the presence lay dormant until we, or Lee, used it regularly. Or perhaps certain environmental triggers awakened it. Occasionally, May and I found ourselves whispering late at night about how we might have ended up if we'd never discovered the truth, if we'd kept using the mirror obliviously. Would the haunting intensify? Could it have caused injuries worse than a few nail scratches? We never told Lee or her roommate the full story. It felt unnecessary to frighten them. Lee once asked, "So, did your sister want the mirror back? Did you give it to her?" We just nodded, smiling politely. She never probed further. Jin, on the other hand, was relieved to know we'd taken the mirror to the temple. She confided that she'd had nightmares for days after glimpsing that pale woman's reflection. "I feel calmer now," she told me during a phone call, knowing it's out of circulation. Final exams came and went, a year rolled by, and May and I found a better living arrangement. Our original ground floor unit was drafty and had issues with insects, so we upgraded to a different building near campus. We parted ways with Ms. Nguyen politely, grateful that we'd never have to see that dingy, mirrorless room again. Occasionally, a random memory of that night, when I felt my body lifted, the phantom voice calling my name, would surface like a bad dream. But with time, it lost its sharp edge. May never again used the pink mirror either, spooked by association. She ended up giving it away to a cousin who had no negative experiences, as far as we knew. It seemed the only truly haunted one had been the green mirror. Every so often, I'd share a toned-down version of the story with close friends, omitting certain details. I'd emphasize the comedic side, like the time we had a cursed mirror and had to bring it to a temple. That always earned some laughs, along with wide-eyed fascination. People asked if I'd physically seen a ghost, or if it was just my imagination. I usually shrugged, half smiling. All I know is it felt real enough that I'm never messing with unknown second-hand mirrors again. May concurred wholeheartedly whenever the subject arose. She never forgave herself for handing the green mirror to Lee without warning, but at least we retrieved it before anything worse happened. 2 years passed. By then, May and I had finished our diplomas, each venturing onto separate career paths. One lazy afternoon, I visited the temple again to catch up with Ray, who had become a fully ordained monk. Over herbal tea, I inquired about the green mirror we'd left in his care long ago. It was cleansed thoroughly, Ray said, setting his teacup down. I performed rituals for a full day, but the sense of unrest lingered. Ultimately, I decided it was best to bury it in consecrated ground behind the temple. The presence within was not malignant, but too deeply rooted to remove easily. My chest felt oddly tight with sympathy. So that spirit or presence. Hay nodded. Hopefully, it found release, or at least no longer clings to that object. Sometimes such wandering energies just need to be set free from the material anchor. I thanked him quietly. As I left, I couldn't help picturing the mirror, sealed away under the earth, the reflection of that pale woman drifting into the wind. Maybe, in some intangible realm, she was no longer trapped, no longer desperate to reach out to unsuspecting people. That night, I told May the news via video call. She let out a huge sigh, relief in her eyes. "I'm glad it's done," she said, "and I hope that spirit found peace." I echoed her sentiment. Me too. And we can move on, chalk it up to a weird college memory we overcame. In the end, we each carried away lessons. Never blindly trust an unknown second-hand item, especially one with a questionable vibe. Always trust your instincts if you sense something is deeply wrong. And sometimes, to truly put a restless presence to rest, you have to seek help, be it spiritual, practical, or a mix of both. Because sometimes, what stares back at you from the glass isn't just your reflection.